do like to tell as a folk tale, as if it were a folk tale, and I like to tell it in an oral style, it's called Coppelia, and it has that treble structure, the three kind of repetitions, something happens slightly differently 3 times.
We'll come back to the repetition structure because it's important.
Yes, and I completely strip it down, and I even change the ending slightly, and you would recognise it, but it's very much changed, and to learn it orally is very much sort of radically sort of stripping it down and adapting it, and all the time, as you know, with storytelling, you're extemporising, you're ad-libbing. It's kind of like polished improvisation,
so
different.
It really isn't like learning a tale.
No, it's...
So how do you remember a story?
It's not like that. Well, you learn kind of key themes.
So if I gave you a story you may or may not know, can you give me the themes that you will remember?
Well, yes. I mean, that's...
Give me a story.
That's what...
and tell me what you remember. Just give me a short story and tell me what you remember. I know. We'll do another little performance. Let us do the merchant, the ferryman and the merchant.
Oh, well, all right then. I will tell this story as it was told to me. Well, I'm a ferryman, and you get a lot of really queer fares in this job, I can tell you. Well, one day I was rowing across this ruddy grey river, and halfway across, this bloke, well, you could tell he was quite well off by his sort of costly clothes and chains around his neck, and this fairy turned to me and he said,
My man, tell me, what philosophy do you know?
Well, I don't have much time for it in this job.
What literature have you read?
Well, I'm always really tired when
What algebra can you solve?
Well, not much call for it in
What
this...
books can you read?
Well, I really never have...
You probably can't read, I would have thought.
Charming.
Well, sir, I regret to tell you, you are a man who has wasted your life.
Well, there's not a lot you can say to that now, is there? Well, I put him out at the other bank, and he gave me some money, and as he paid me, he said,
Oh, my man, make sure you are here in an hour or so. Here is a guinea for you.
What?
It is genuine. Gold.
I didn't wait about. Of course, I took other fares in the meantime, but as it happens, at the end of the hour, I was on this side of the bank.
That's good, my man. Let us go across.
And halfway across, well, not a lot of people know this, but many ferrymen, well, we don't own our own boats, but we hire them. And, oh dear, the bloke I'd hired mine from, well, he obviously hadn't mended it in just too long. The clinker started coming apart and we started shipping water. Oh, it was a dreadful business, so it was. And at that point, I saw that we were in real trouble, and I turned to my fare and I said, I suppose amongst all the wonderful things you've learnt during your lifetime, learning to swim has been one of them.
Of course not. Why would I have learned to swim?
Well, in that case, my good sir, I think you've been wasting your life. And with that, I dived into the water and swam to the bank while he sank.
And that story, we probably remember about how, if you actually ask me to remember it, I don't. I remember a few points, I know where it's going. And personally with that, because it's a banter one and we're doing it between us, I kind of half remember my points and I pick up my cues from you. Don't know how you do it.
Yeah, pretty much the same kind of thing. It's sort of a cue thing, so it's got an internal logic. So as soon as kind of one person says one thing, you kind of know what's coming next. You know how to respond. Yeah, so it's a really
and when you hear a news story, suppose there was a news story you really liked, how would you remember it? Suppose you were nicking, and one of the great things about storytelling, by the way, one of the things I love most about it is that we all nick each other's material, and we're all absolutely open about it. Yeah, we'll joke about it and stuff, but we're all aware that if you perform in front of another storyteller and they like the story gets stolen. That's the point of folk tales. They're stealable. So how do we do it?
Well, I like to think of it, rather than stealing, as some sort of, it's just the continuance of the oral tradition, although it has to be said that most of the stories that I find in sort of odd textual sources, ironically, but sometimes, yeah, you do hear a version of a story that's very wonderful, and then you think, I think that's a really good take on it. Well, it's just remembering a few bullet points, basically, so when you read something, and then you think, or indeed hear something, and certain things about it strike you.
So is the repetition structure important there, then?
Well, that's really vital. I mean, the oldest and sort of the earliest.
And it's always threes, isn't it?
Pretty much, yes. Or that's really quite a dominant thing. I mean, there are stories that don't have it, but very often.
And do you have to repeat it exactly the same each time?
Well, no. I mean, that's the beauty of the whole kind of oral thing. It can be slightly different each time.
I see. And does that build effect then? Do you do that?
On audience and. Well, I mean, it depends what you mean by by the treble structure, because often whatever it is changes slightly. Like if you've got there's the castle of gold, the castle of silver, or the castle of glass, for instance. So
I see. So you actually
that's kind of building
the
up.
repetition is building intensity by a bit of change.
That's right, because it gets even slippier.
So it's like a drum beat, but the drum beat is slightly louder. Would that be a fair analogy?
Yes, that kind of thing. And in the three sillies, I mean, the people get dafter and dafter. I mean, there's the woman who's sort of feeding her cow on her roof and it's eating away the thatch, and that's pretty crazy. And then there's the guy who doesn't know how to put on a pair of trousers, so hangs them on the door, and that's really ludicrous. But then you get a whole village full of idiots who think that the moon has fallen in the water because they see its reflection.
The joke builds.
Well, that's it, yes. Until he finds...
Is that the story where the narrator ends up as the biggest silly lot for the other one can look at? And so that's all part of the joke?
That's right, yes.
So the fourth silly is sillier than all the other three sillies?
Yes, that's right. But that's kind of, and that's almost outside the repetition structure, because he is the narrator, and that's a truly fantastic story.
It helps you remember having a repetition structure. It builds intensity. Are there any other tricks of memory you sometimes use?
Well,
do you, for instance, classify stories and say, well, it's all like one of them then?
Well, I kind of don't mentally do the thing of like the massive online database. Oh, that's the story of type whatever. But I do, yes. I mean, it helps. Lazy Massa. There's a ludicrous Swedish story about a silly, and it is fundamentally quite similar to the three sillies, which is in itself found in Arabia and Italy, and here there are traditional variants. So yes.
And with storytelling, how creative is it then? Because do people say, oh, do you just learn stories, or do you ever write your own? Is there a snobbery?
Well, there's a massive vexed question there, really. I mean, seriously, because some people really, yes, because they think, oh, it's from the oral tradition, or it's, sort of you picked that up from hearing it from somebody else, or you found it, sort of on an online database or in a book. Therefore, it's not creative. You're not doing something new and fresh and different. And I think most storytellers that are really serious about what they do would profoundly disagree with that, because what you bring to it is not just your own voice and your own gestures and your own take on it. And if you treat it, sort of as more storytelling theatre, as for instance we do, sort of you bring a whole range of props and visual creativity to it. But you also bring that you can change the point, you can change the ending, you change the characters. I mean, I once did a version of Circe's story that was something many people have done, but it wasn't from an Odyssey point of view. It wasn't, it was from her point of view.
From Circe's point of view.
Yes, and it was about the whole kind of incident with sort of in the Odyssey between her and Odysseus.
Or you could do Hansel and Gretel from the Witch's point
exactly.
of view.
You can,
I feed you because I love you, and that's why I eat you.
Yes,
some line like
all that sort of thing.
I've been rehearsing that line all week.
You can do it from the villain's point of view. You can take out any kind of mad side character you want. You can make the hero into a villain if you think that the stories are,
So it's they're rewriting a play. It's a bit like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead.
Yes, yeah, very much so. You're taking traditional characters and totally...
So why is it then that storytelling is at all different from just bad drama?
Well, partly because it does draw on this lovely stock of traditional wisdom and traditional jokes, and in some cases traditional music as well.
Do you have fixed lines?
So it's got a kind of ancient thing going on. More often than not, no, really.
Okay.
But these.
So when we're doing a dialogue, we actually don't have fixed lines. Let that get that clear.
No, I mean there are certain lines that one thinks are good and therefore worth putting in again. Certain key things, and you think, oh yes, definitely.
And the rest is done on how you relate to the audience, actually.
Yes, that too, and it means it gives you flexibility. I mean, few art forms can change what they're doing as the audience, sort of as seems appropriate for the age group.
Do you have different lengths for stories?
That's quite amazing. Yes, I mean, yes, we do, because you can, it can be. I mean, how long is a piece of string? You can take a 12-minute story and you can jam it into 3 minutes if you need to, or 7 minutes, or you could take a 7-minute story and jam it into 3 minutes. I mean, Chris Brooks, what sort of wonderful storyteller poet who runs the Blue Walnut Performance Poetry Night down in Torquay. I mean, I'll never forget hearing his Master of Masters, which is a traditional story, but his take on it is quite wonderful because he can tell it full length. But I've once heard him cram it into a single minute, which was a most extraordinary feat of quick talking, especially as it's got some ludicrous long phrases in it, like sort of cockalorum and things like that, with like loads of syllables.